big topic today, AI marketing. Show of hands, who in the room knows what AI marketing is? Nice, awesome. Show of hands, who in the room are marketers? You guys are all marketers. I expect to see way more hands than that. All right, well, so my name is Alex Sherman. I'm the CEO of Bluefish AI. We are a platform that helps the largest brands in the world essentially optimize how the large AI providers portray their products and services to consumers using those platforms. And I'm super excited to have Rustom Dastoor, who is the EVP of marketing at Mastercard today, for a discussion on what the heck is AI marketing, what are the changes to consumer behaviors because of AI, and what are the implications for marketers. So Rustom, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So Andreessen Horowitz, the large venture firm, just released a report essentially quantifying just how significant this trend is and how AI has shifted how consumers are using AI to discover products and services online. A few highlights from that report. ChatGPT just reached 1 billion users. And most notably, when they launched, they were adding 1 million users every hour. And a year ago, I think all that anyone wanted to talk about was, is Google dead? Will Google ever catch up? And it seems that Google has turned the corner. So Gemini is now adding new users at 155% year over year, which, considering how significant their user base is, those are huge numbers. So it seems that consumers are starting to adopt AI at real scale. So how do you think about that trend? What's happening with the consumer? And from your point of view, how do you think about this shift just from a consumer trend point of view?
Yeah, look, the hype is real. We know that. We're starting to see that in the data. Gartner estimates that by as little as next year, 50% of people in advanced economies will use agentic search in some form or the other. What we're seeing right now is there are 3 areas it's sort of pulling away in, and it's quite expected. Everyone can relate to it. One is shopping assistance, so just being able to be better aware of what you're buying, product reviews, etc. The second is travel, which I'm sure all of us have booked a trip using ChatGPT at some point. And the third is financial literacy. So from a trend standpoint, those are the 3 trends that seem to be sort of pulling away with everyday consumers. No surprise, Gen Z and millennials are adopting it at an exponentially higher rate than older consumers, but that's to be expected with any new technology coming around.
So as marketers, we've seen this show before, right? Every 5 to 7 years on the internet, a new technology emerges that kind of changes how consumers interact with information online, whether it's mobile, whether it's social, video, search. How is this trend different? How is it similar?
Yeah, I think this is a major change or a step change for marketers. And perhaps the last time we've seen this level of disruption, you'd have to go back to the 90s and the advent of the digital revolution. So we're at the start of something exceptional. There's no question about that. I mean, I'll give you a personal story and then sort of how it impacts our professional lives, right? Last year, I took a family vacation to Chicago. I took all our preferences, put it into ChatGPT, put in my budget, put in the duration, and as expected, the perfect itinerary came out. My interests, my wife's interests, my son's needs, the perfect flight, the perfect hotel, backup plans for a rain day, everything. There was just one thing that bothered me no end. There was no room for marketing messaging. So from a consumer standpoint, it was awesome. I got this instant response that I was looking for. For a marketer, it was daunting because I wasn't influenced by an airline, a hotel, a restaurant, nothing. So there is a real risk that my next consumer may never see a marketing message from me. And that's something we've got to start preparing for and working towards.
Yeah, I think anytime consumers have adopted sort of a new platform as quickly as AI, that inevitably creates new opportunities and new risks for marketers. How should marketers start to think about those risks? So certainly there's, what if we don't show up? But from your vantage point, You run a super sophisticated team of marketers across all of the different digital channels. How do you think about risk in this particular space?
So look, we've got hardwired to thinking of B2C marketing and B2B marketing. We've now got an acronym, which is B2A marketing, and the A being agents. Now, in itself, it is not daunting because you've got to think of an agent as an influencer. And we've marketed to influencers for years. So for instance, in our business, when we're trying to sell products to ultra high net worth individuals, it's generally through a financial advisor or a wealth manager. If you're trying to sell high-end apparel, it's generally through a stylist. So the influencer has always been there. And as a function, as marketers, we know how to market to influencers. The only difference this time is that the influencer is not human. It's a machine. So that sounds like a sort of, a mic drop moment. But this is what we've now got to start preparing for, is how do you market to a machine?
Yeah, I mean, we just wrapped up the holiday shopping season. So something like $1 trillion of goods were sold over the last 3 months. And, some massive percentage of those shopping journeys, whether it's on Google, whether it's on Amazon, whether it's on Meta, over the last 3 months for the first time was almost entirely influenced by AI. So you've got this almost new consumer purchasing journey that is, you see this sort of collapse of the marketing funnel where now an agent is actively helping that consumer figure out, what do I buy? What's the best fit for my needs? How do I comparison shop? What's the right price? So as marketers, how do you measure that? How do you start to think about this in a more, I guess, sophisticated way?
Look, firstly, it's a new muscle and a new technology environment that we've got to get ready for, right? The first question you've got to ask yourself is, you've got a ton of content out there. So in our case, we've got 30 years worth of marketing content, product specifications, benefits, offers, the tone and manner in which our brand manifests, etc. But you've got to now make that available for a machine. So do you convert all of that content into JSON or XML? Do you organize and sort that content into a DMP? Traditionally, DMPs have almost served as sort of storage devices, but now they've got to become like the brains of the brand, almost like an intelligent device in which your content is organized, gated, and made fit for purpose for an agent search. You've also got to have APIs that allow that content to be pulled. That creates a whole other level of complexity, starting off with security. You want to make sure that when an agent approaches your DMP or pulls your data, it's gated in a way that they only get access to what you want them to have access to. So that's a level of sophistication that'll be needed. Then there's the element of data out in the wild. It's very easy for a fraudster to spoof a brand like ours using data. So data has to now start being authenticated. So what does tokenized data look like? How do you use cryptography or hashing to make sure that content that is out there is verified as content that is coming from your brand and not from a fraudster? You've then got to think about branding differently. Historically, when we've thought about branding, it's been more physical attributions, logos, colors, fonts, maybe tone and manner. That doesn't mean anything in an agentic environment. So we've got to start thinking of technical branding as to how does your brand differentiate itself within an algorithm. So these are sort of opportunity areas that brands now need to start thinking a lot about and preparing for this system-to-system communication era that we're heading into.
And which teams are doing this? So I would say at Bluefish, we tend to see sort of a mix of search, content, PR, corp comms, sometimes the e-commerce teams that have all been sort of brought together to manage this new AI channel. But realistically, this is the first time that they've all been in the room together doing some of the things that you've described. How much of this is net new, an evolution? Which teams are doing what? What does this look like practically?
Yeah, I think we're still trying to define what that practical architecture looks like. I think you've got a lot of competencies in different parts of organizations. Orchestrating them and stitching them together is going to be sort of the challenge at hand. I think you're also going to have a whole host of new roles emerge out of this, where people's entire jobs is just orchestration of different elements of a company's business and a company's attributes so that it shows up as one whole in an agentic environment. So I think we've got to rethink organization structures. We've got to rethink collaboration between functions within an organization. You've got to rethink partnerships with external entities. All of this is now up in play. And I think it's quite exciting and quite interesting as to where it could go.
Yeah, and how do you start to think about measurement? Like one of the when we work with clients at Bluefish, they think of sort of four kind of dimensions that they want to optimize towards. There's visibility. So are we showing up when a consumer searches in ChatGPT? Are we in the response? There's favorability. So how positively are we portrayed? Then there's accuracy. Are the details of our products a hallucination or are they accurate? And then influence. How much do we have our sort of hands on the wheel? Are we in control? But it's early, right? Have any KPIs started to sort of really get formalized yet, or is it too early days?
It's early, but not too early. So, for instance, it depends on the nature of your business, right? Our business has a consumer side, which is the credit card, debit card, prepaid business that you know us for. We also have a commercial business that sells cybersecurity products, money movement products, etc. The KPIs vary. On the consumer side, it's a very long sales cycle. Getting a credit card is not an impulse buy. So we've got to start off with things like brand affinity and making sure that when consumers adopt AI more extensively, the proclivity towards brands and branding doesn't disappear entirely. It is important for them to have an affinity with our brand so that when their bank offers the brand to them, they're receptive to it. That then takes us to an acquisition-led approach, which is through the bank that we work with, so our issuers or our merchants or our digital partners, and enabling them. We've got more than 10,000 partners who market our products to more than 1 billion consumers. So we want to make sure that the entire ecosystem is enabled to do this. If we do this alone, we will fail and we will fall short because the majority of our marketing is through our partner environment. So the KPIs differ. And then, of course, with the commercial business, we're trying to close a sale on a cybersecurity solution or on a data analytics solution. It is more of a traditional, regular sales cycle where you go through the spectrum of would you consider Mastercard for a product like this, and then how fast do you convert them.
And do you see like different AI prompts and responses as sort of mimicking kind of different stages of the funnel for these consumers? Like, do you optimize for upper funnel prompts and responses and lower funnel prompts and responses, or how does it work?
It's still early days in that regard, but the complexity of this is going to very quickly become a little overwhelming, right? I mean, I'll give you a simple example. In our commercial business, right, we're increasingly seeing commercial buyers build business plans in a ChatGPT or a Gemini. I mean, we've all seen the jokes online about McKinsey going out of business because you can replicate a McKinsey consultant
I'm excited.
in ChatGPT. Apologies to anyone from McKinsey. But what that does mean is that we now need to make our products show up in those business plans that the AI spits out. And the buyer type might be very different. It might be a CISO, it might be a CFO, it might be a CTO, and their profiles and what they're searching for and what they're organized around from a content standpoint might look very different.
I think that's what's so interesting about this space is that because AI is non-deterministic and because it is also hyper-personalized, where these responses are tailored to individual preferences, histories, etc., it's a much more sort of challenging thing to optimize for. It makes search almost seem, I dare say simple. yeah, exactly. So when you're going back to what you were saying earlier, when you're generating that content, when you're creating content to essentially help inform the models, help teach them about your brand, how do you navigate? How do you manage for those different stakeholders, those different personas? Are you literally forking the content by customer segment or target persona, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, again, it starts off by having a very clear understanding of who you want to sell to and what their need state is. So I think sometimes we shouldn't forget that even though we're going into this highly technical, technological era of marketing, the principles of marketing and the foundational practices still remain and still hold true. So understanding your audience, segmenting your audience, mapping their need state with your product benefits, that's all still very much table stakes. It's then how do you put that on steroids and make those connections that really AI will help you dramatically change. So I think we still need a level of traditional legacy marketing thinking in doing what you were just suggesting, which is understanding how these different segments view products differently, have different need states, have different buying journeys, and then using the technology to enable that.
So maybe a bit of a wild card question then. It seems like the implication is that if consumers are going to be spending more time in AI and less time navigating the open internet, does that mean that paid starts to change, or rather the split between organic and paid shifts? I mean, as marketers, I think we're very accustomed, based on the ways that we've done digital marketing for the last 20 years, with this sort of standard split between organic and paid. Does that shift? Does that start to change?
Look, this is just speculation on my part, but the platforms are going to need to make money. At some point, everyone's going to have to pay for this infrastructure that they're building out. So some level of paid, some level of gating and pay to play is going to be there. That's how they're going to be able to build these things out. What that looks like today, I do not know. And I think the platforms are being cautious in that they don't want to slow down adoption by asking people to sort of pay for gated access. But I think longer term, just the way search evolved into more organic search versus paid search, you're going to see some landscape evolve where platforms can start seeing revenue for the investment that they put in.
I mean, the potential is there, right? Like there is sort of this holy grail of actually delivering sort of right ad, right time, right place, right user that AI is sort of the perfect ideal vehicle for. That being said, it hasn't really happened yet, right? Like we've seen early experiments on the Google side. OpenAI has been sort of rumored to launch ads, and now it seems that's going to go live in Q1. We'll see if that actually happens. How do you think that plays out?
Yeah, I mean, don't know as yet. But what's also going to add another level of complexity is the data owners and how they treat the use of their data in these environments. So we haven't seen that penny drop as yet. But whether it's content creators, whether it's publishers, whether it's image libraries, how did they start viewing monetization of their content, and what are the legal implications around trademark, copyright, etc.? That's going to be another element that's going to shape and impact how this ecosystem builds out.
I think that's so fascinating because, for the longest time as a brand, your website was kind of your front door on the internet. It was how the internet learned about your products, your services, and certainly you have, partners as well. But it sounds like that needs to fundamentally shift because, put simply, your website just was not designed to be a data delivery mechanism for large language models. So it sounds like the role of data, the role of content, the role of just information about commercial brands and sort of the pathways, the ways that that data gets sent to these models is probably going to shift as well, right?
Yeah, I'd question, why do we even need a website anymore? Like if your interface is through a chatbot, why do you need a website? We need system-to-system communication where the chatbot and the AI will talk to our systems, our DMPs. You probably don't need a website. If we're talking about that trip to Chicago where the hotel and the airline books itself, why do I need to go to any airline's website or any hotel's website? I can just do that through my agentic chatbot. So in that case, we've also got to start thinking about, do we need to build out these large, monuments on the internet called websites? We probably don't.
Yeah, so historically, the way these trends have played out is sort of slow then fast, right? In this case, it seems like the consumer is already there. Like, consumers are already using ChatGPT. You're already planning the trip. Even consumers who don't use ChatGPT, who use sort of legacy Google products, Google has effectively become an AI company at this point. So, when do you see this evolution of the website or evolution of kind of the pillars of how marketing works really start to transition? Is that a 2026 thing, 27?
Look, I go back to the early years of the internet going mainstream, right? The companies that broke out and the use cases that broke out sort of waned and disappeared about 5 or 10 years in. And that's when you had the Googles, the Metas, the Netflixes, the Ubers, the new business models, the creator economy, the streaming, the gig economy. They showed up in sort of the 2.0 era. And there's probably going to be a 2.0 era to AI as well. I just think we'll get to it a lot faster because the devices are now there, the data is there, the investment is there, and the hunger for adoption is there. So it'll probably be a much faster ramp up. But I still think what we'll see 5 years from now will look nothing like what we're expecting sitting here today.
So what happens to the Lumascape?
We'll have to see.
Yeah, I think so we're a few days into the new year. Any predictions for the next 12 months? What should we expect?
Look, it's a brave person that sits here in the first week of Jan and makes a prediction for the end of this year. I will say this though, we don't know where AI is going to go, but what we do have some line of sight of is that to succeed with AI, you've got to really succeed with data. And understanding data is a foundational building block to succeeding with AI. How data is collected, how it's stored, how it's organized, how it's deployed, what it enables. And if there's one thing that I'm trying to do, and I'd encourage others to do as well, is to really understand basic principles of data management, because that'll be the foundation and the building blocks to whatever you do with AI down the road. So it's not a prediction, but it is sort of a helpful piece of advice maybe that I'd share.
Fantastic. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the conversation.